Go. I'm rather blinded by the thing, which might be a boon for myself. That's a lie. You guys are all beautiful faced, so yeah. Thanks for coming down to my my talk. This is my fifth in a long series of the Being Human lectures that I do, which open up into discussion towards the end. Just generally kind of pointing out just interesting facets / very beautiful and life-affirming elements of the human psyche, and why it's amazing to be human, and just different perspectives on the whole rigmarole that is our fleeting lives. So once I get flux off, we shall begin. So this lecture is fundamentally, or this talk rather, is fundamentally about it's about three separate parts, none of which are particularly long, but I've separated into three. First, we're going to go into the Jungian Shadow. So, raise of hands, who's generally familiar with the Jungian Shadow? Anybody? 2, 3. Okay, great. Yeah. Fantastic. Who would like to venture forth a basic idea of the Jungian Shadow? Who's feeling brave?
Yeah.
Yes, mate, you're on it. Go on.
Oh no, you'll venture forward now, listen.
Oh no, that's someone else going to do. I'm giving us a yes, please, go.
If I may, everything that we kind of repress and deny about ourselves.
Fantastic. Absolutely. No, you're bang on. It is, so I'll give you a little basic history about Freud versus Jung. Carl Jung. Who's heard the name Carl Jung? Raise your hand. Yeah, you've heard the name. Well, you haven't, because I said it 30 seconds ago. You're cheeky first. No, essentially, yeah, Carl Jung was a contemporary of Freud. He was actually a Freud student, but he diverged very significantly, mostly on where we get our innate drives from. Also partially from how he conceives of the ego. And one of his main things about the unconscious was the shadow, and the shadow self. And so we're going to go into that very, very briefly. But I've studied this quite in depth. I've done philosophy of mind. I personally have written things, and I am also, I've just studied some cognitive behavioural therapy as well, which is actually, I mean, the Jungian Shadow is such a useful tool whenever I do give therapy to people. So it's a really amazing thing. And after all my studies, after everything I've ever seen, this is the most succinct and most effective synopsis of the human relationship with our unconscious. And that's the talk over. Thank you, everybody. Cheers. Yeah, have a nice evening. That's the human relationship. But in a lot of ways, it basically is that. It's this element we cannot admit to ourselves and we struggle with. So I've already kind of touched on this a little bit, the ego and like the Freudian ego. So the ego in the Jungian sense is everything that we identify as. It's very similar to the Buddhist concept of the ego. It's the I. You know, I am this, I do this, I love this, I believe this, I am, etc., etc. Now, the problem that happens is that in the unconscious, in the Jungian unconscious, this creates a shadow from the light of the ego and its content. And therefore, for example, if you say, I am selfless, suddenly your selfishness is put into the shadow, and you condemn it in yourself, or you condemn it in other people, or sometimes fall in love with it with other people as well, depending on how you want to redeem the elements of your shadow. And this is inherently the issue with particularly our culture, well I think many cultures, but the fear of contradiction is something I'll touch on as well, how with the primacy of rationality, a binary conceptual basis leads us to not like contradiction, e.g. I cannot be introverted and extroverted, they're opposites, you know. Where really we're going to look at how to identify these things as paradoxes instead of contradictory. And obviously it's often projected onto others in the form of shadow projection, which is something else I'll talk on as well. So there's a brief overview. And there's a lovely little cartoon, love thy neighbour, and they're laughing at him, and the shadow is definitely trying to hit them on the head. His repressed element, because let's face it, we all want to hit cheeky cunts on the head sometimes, no matter how pious we seem to be. Sorry for these. So shadow projection. So this is a quote by Carl Jung.